Judicial nominee in the hot seat. One of President Trump's picks for the U.S. Court of Appeals is grilled on topics including abortion. Rex Tillerson in Myanmar. The Secretary of State travels to the Asian nation just weeks before the Holy Father's visit. My one-on-one with Cardinal Timothy Dolan. The Archbishop of New York City talks to us from Baltimore about his work in the pro-life movement. And vroom, vroom, a custom ride for Pope Francis. We'll tell you more in a report from Rome. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, November 15th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you for joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. A judicial nominee and a Twitter all-star faces senators' questions about his pro-life views. President Trump picked Don Willett to serve on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi was at the confirmation hearing and joins us. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump also placed Justice Willett on his list of possible Supreme Court justices during the campaign. Willett is outspoken on Twitter. Today's confirmation hearing could be a tryout for this judge, known for his wit on that social media platform.
He's a former rodeo bull rider. Now Texas Supreme Court Justice Don Willett is in another ring, defending his conservative values.
My personal views, Senator Blumenthal, they do not affect my judicial views.
So you disavow being pro-life, pro-faith, pro-family for purposes of your judicial rulings?
And just to clarify, Senator, I wasn't describing myself that way. I was rallying the support of those leaders. I was supported by pro-life leaders.
With tweets like these, the Texas legislature named Willett Tweeter Laureate. But he's also weighed in on hot-button issues including same-sex marriage and the transgender debate. In 2014, Judge Willett shared an article on Twitter about a transgender high schooler playing on a girls' softball team. He seemed to call the teen A-Rod, referring to baseball player Alex Rodriguez. That comment drew criticism.
Do you think it demonstrates good judgment to publicly demean and humiliate a 17-year-old girl on Twitter?
Senator Franken, I believe that every child is a gift. Every child is a blessing.
Willett has an interesting background. He was raised by a single mother in a town of only 32 people. He worked in the Department of Justice and in the White House under President Bush, providing counsel on religious liberty issues. Since 2005, Willett has been a justice on the Texas Supreme Court. Lauren?
Justice Willett has more than 100,000 followers on Twitter. And now, if he's confirmed, will the Texas Tweeter Laureate give up his account?
Willett tells senators he's not sure right now. He says using social media really helps demystify the courts. Now, if the Senate Judiciary Committee votes to confirm him, it would then go to the full Senate. He only needs a simple majority here to be confirmed to that lifetime position, and it's likely he'll get that with all Republicans expected to back him.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, thank you. The FBI may be investigating Planned Parenthood. A report says agents have requested unredacted documents from a Senate committee. That panel was looking into whether abortion providers illegally sold fetal tissue. Planned Parenthood denies the charges. For new details on Planned Parenthood and a possible FBI investigation, follow CatholicNewsAgency.com. Republicans want to revisit the health care debate. The GOP is pushing a broad tax cut for businesses and many individuals. The cuts include a repeal of the Obamacare law requiring Americans to have health insurance. The House is voting on its tax reform bill tomorrow. Joining us now is Representative Mike Kelly, a Republican from Pennsylvania who serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, the chief tax writing committee in the House. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, Lauren. Good to talk to you.
You too. Will you be able to come to an agreement with the Senate in order to get this tax bill to the president's desk by Christmas?
Well, you know what? We have a very strong person sitting in the White House right now and a guy who really is able to put deals together. It's going to be difficult because tax reform is difficult. It's very complicated, but I think we're going to have a driving force that does get us there. There's some things in the Senate bill that I'm not quite on board with yet, but we'll look at it and we'll get something to the president that he can eventually sign and really make America boom again.
Let's talk about the Johnson Amendment. It's the provision in the tax code that prohibits nonprofit organizations like charities and churches from campaign activity, and the House and Senate bills would repeal this amendment. But some critics feel that this repeal would lead to corruption in the church, and there are Catholic groups that want to keep their tax-exempt status. So what makes sense, repeal or no repeal?
Well, listen, I can tell you, for me speaking as a Catholic, I can remember sitting down with my priest, Father Harry, and going through my confession. And at the end of it, after he gave me my penance, I said, Father, are you going to speak out at all on the life issues that we have in this current election? And this is back when President Obama was running. He said, I can't speak from the pulpit about that. We're not allowed to. I said, wait a minute, you're who I go to for any type of moral leadership and for religious conviction. That's the most important part of who we are. Why can't you talk about it? He said, well, we've just been advised that if we do, it's going to interfere with our tax-free status. And I thought at that point, have we come to a place in America where our religious leaders have got to guard their speech because of a tax situation and what could possibly happen? I don't think there's anything that I feel as an American that's more important to me than issues of life at all stages. And I thought this was kind of odd that we would try to tamp down the ability of us to go to our church, listen to our leaders, our faith leaders, our religious leaders, and get their opinion so that we can come to a decision about what's best for us and how we would vote.
Speaking of life issues, you pushed to keep the adoption tax credit in the House bill. You were applauded for that by your colleagues. Some advocates, though, are still worried that it could be taken out. What do you say to them?
Well, you know what? That's my job, and that's the job of all of us to make sure that it doesn't get taken out, that it does stay in. And when it comes to matters of life, I think that's one thing that I've always been perplexed about. People say, we have to have a debate about this issue. I said, when we have to stop and debate on life issues, something's gone wrong as a culture, not only as a country and as a nation. So I thought it was really important.
Thank you so much for joining us, Representative Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
Lawmakers are calling on Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore to quit the race, but some pro-life leaders are supporting him. Janet Folger Porter, a pro-life activist for more than 30 years, is holding a news conference tomorrow to support Moore. She says, quote, "We are confident the voters in Alabama will not be fooled by suspiciously timed accusations without evidence." 5 women accuse Moore of sexual misconduct, 2 from when they were teenagers in the 70s. He denies the claims. Congressman Jackie Speer and Barbara Comstock have accused sitting male lawmakers of sexual harassment and misconduct. The two are trying to get help for other victims.
All they ask in return as staff members is to be able to work in a hostile-free work environment. They want the system fixed and the perpetrators held accountable.
The accusations came during a hearing in the House Administration Committee, part of a review of how the House handles sexual harassment claims. The Senate last week passed a resolution making sexual harassment training mandatory. The president is back at the White House and is talking about his recent Asia trip. It comes as the growing humanitarian crisis in Myanmar gains attention from world leaders. White House correspondent Mark Irons joins us now. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Donald Trump says his trip to Asia showed that America's standing in the world has never been stronger. He spoke this afternoon about his 5-country Asian tour, updating the nation on what he calls a tremendous success. President Trump says the trip was historic and says the United States was treated with incredible warmth, hospitality, and most importantly, respect. Secretary Rex Tillerson stayed on and visited Myanmar. Human rights activists say about 700,000 Rohingya Muslims were forced to flee that Asian country in the wake of deadly violence. Now the U.S. wants to help end the bloodshed and hold the suspects accountable.
People told me about seeing family members killed, about watching as the military burned down houses, burned people alive. raped people and submitted people to public humiliation.
Andrea Gittleman fights for human rights through her work at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. She contributed to a new report just released today, formed using the personal stories of more than 200 survivors of violence in Burma, also known as Myanmar.
The report that the museum released today with Fortify Rights details crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, mass atrocities on a wide scale.
The report claims mounting evidence of genocide against the Rohingya, a Muslim minority group attacked by the Burmese military. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson calls for an independent investigation of the humanitarian crisis, saying the U.S. is considering sanctions against the people responsible for the violence.
We're also distressed by the fact that hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children have been forced to flee to Bangladesh.
It's created what Gittleman calls one of the fastest growing refugee crises of our time, something Pope Francis will continue to address when he visits the region later this month.
I think having a moral voice, talk about the need for community, for tolerance, to end violence, not to target people based on their religion or ethnicity, I think that would be so important for the people of Burma to hear.
The Pope leaves for his week-long trip to the region on November 26th. He'll spend the first half in Myanmar before going to Bangladesh. Lauren.
Did Secretary Tillerson reference aid coming from the U.S.?
He says the U.S. will provide an additional $47 million in humanitarian aid to the refugees, on top of the $40 million we've already spent on the crisis unfolding across Myanmar and Bangladesh.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Australia will consider legalizing same-sex marriage possibly by Christmas. Nearly 2/3 of Australians said they support gay marriage in a postal survey to all registered voters. The Archbishop of Sydney says he was deeply disappointed by the results. He adds it might, quote, lead to further deconstruction of the family. Zimbabwe's military is holding the country's president and his wife under house arrest in what appears to be a coup. President Robert Mugabe, who is 93, has been in control for 37 years. Zimbabwe's ruling party accuses him of treasonable conduct and attempting to incite insurrection. The military says it's not a takeover, but the start of a process to restore democracy. A U.S. administration official says the White House is monitoring the situation. The death toll rises to at least 14 following severe flash floods in Athens. An overnight rainstorm knocks out part of a major highway, inundates homes with mud, and tosses cars and trucks against buildings. Pakistani Catholic bishops announce a year of the Eucharist to focus on renewal and service. The year will begin later this month on the Solemnity of Christ the King. The bishops say the year is meant to be a time of spiritual growth, and the Vatican says about 1% of Pakistan's population is Catholic. A congressional committee in Brazil votes to make abortion illegal, with no exceptions. Thousands marched through Rio earlier this week protesting. Abortion is illegal in Brazil, with a few exceptions, including rape, and if a pregnancy threatens a woman's life. The proposed measure is part of a constitutional amendment and needs a supermajority in Congress and Senate to pass. Germany establishes diplomatic relations with the Sovereign Order of Malta. The group is 900 years old. It's a Catholic lay order with tens of thousands of volunteers working around the globe, from Myanmar to South Sudan. 107 nations now have relations with that order. Coming up, my conversation with Cardinal Dolan.
The consistency of Catholic faith is something that attracts people, and we got to emphasize that.
The head of the Catholic Church in New York City talks to me about the state of the church in America. A pro-abortion student group wants Georgetown University to continue its birth control coverage on their student health insurance plans. The Jesuit University is now exempt from providing contraception. This is based on last month's reversal of part of the Affordable Care Act. Hoyas for Choice wants to be involved in the school's decision. And it's not necessarily easy to be a strong pro-life voice in the heart of New York City, a place with a liberal mayor and many, many pro-choice residents. To change minds there, one must be outgoing, friendly, charming, and very confident in their views. Our next guest is all of those things. Cardinal Timothy Dolan of the Archdiocese of New York joins us now. Welcome to the program.
Lauren, you always make me feel welcome. Thanks for the invite.
And thanks for coming. You are one of the most popular cardinals in the U.S. You have a total gift of being able to connect to
And
Catholics.
you are one of the most perceptive journalists I've ever met.
This is going to be a really fun interview. You've been able to connect to Catholics and non-Catholics alike. Yesterday, we reported a story that by 2050, the leading Catholic regions will be Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but the Catholic population here is declining. What do you think you can do, or the Catholic Church can do, to get people back into the flock?
That, you're asking the bingo question, Lauren. We need to listen to Pope Francis, who tells us it's time to emphasize missionary discipleship. Discipleship means that we listen to the invitation of Jesus to become his follower. And secondly, that we stay close to Jesus. We're nurtured by him in and through his church. And thirdly, once we are a disciple, we introduce our best friend, Jesus, and his family, the church, to other people.
Let me talk to you about how you get people involved who are not Catholics. You get in the converts. One of the issues is pro-life. How do you reconcile these? What does the USCCB need to do to go forward to not only capitalize on the political momentum and move the needle, but also educate other Catholics who are not of the pro-life mindset?
It goes back a bit to what you and I were just chatting about, Lauren. As Catholics, we need to reassert our fundamental belief that what we believe, all right, how we identify ourselves as disciples of Jesus, as committed Catholics, translates to how we act, all right? So you got a lot of people that say, oh, I'm a Catholic, I identify as a Catholic, but it doesn't have an effect on how I act. That's impossible. Once you meet Jesus Christ, once you become part of his family, the church, your life is turned around, and every decision you make is only made under the light of his divine grace. Therefore, our pro-life stance is not some choice. It's not some hobby. It is at the heart of discipleship and our Catholic identity.
But, Cardinal, I think that many people want to stay Catholic, but they want to espouse their pro-choice thought. So how do you change that?
Yeah, Lauren, but wouldn't you admit that's not just a problem with our noble pro-life cause? That's the trouble with everything. It is nigh to impossible to be a good Catholic without respecting all human life. So I think, Lauren, you were talking about what attracts people to the Catholic faith, the coherence, the beautiful choreography, the consistency of Catholic faith is something that attracts people. And we got to emphasize that, darn it. When I talk to converts, with people who are attracted to the faith, they will tell me, darn it, because you Catholics believe in the truth. And you believe that there's a consistency to what we believe. There's an integrity of our faith and morals. And yeah, I'm going to admit that sometimes I have a tough time accepting it and a tougher time living up to it, but at least I've got that goal. At least I've got that light. At least I've got that direction in my Catholic faith.
Cardinal Timothy Dolan of the Archdiocese of New York, thank you so much for joining us.
Lauren, I'm the one who's grateful.
Coming up tomorrow, we will continue my conversation with Cardinal Dolan, and we will surprise him with one of his favorite foods. Tune in tomorrow. Up next, the Pope's new ride. The Holy Father receives a sports car, but will he keep it? Insights into the day-to-day life in ancient times. A new, odd discovery by archaeologists. Today, the Church honors St. Albert the Great on his feast day. He was a 13th century Dominican from Germany and a mentor to St. Thomas Aquinas. In 1931, Pope Pius VI declared Albert a saint and a doctor of the Church. The U.S. bishops say it's okay to begin the sainthood cause for a Lakota medicine man known as Black Elk. Black Elk converted to Catholicism in the Diocese of Rapid City. He helped convert more than 400 Native Americans. The next step is for a tribunal to investigate Black Elk's life. And speaking of possible future saints, don't forget the beatification of Father Solanus Casey is taking place this Saturday in Detroit. EWTN will air the Mass live starting at 4 p.m., and we will also be streaming this on our Facebook page. It's an odd gift for a pope who doesn't get behind the wheel, but he is the proud owner of a $200,000 Lamborghini. He blessed the custom luxury sports car and then signed its hood. But he won't be holding on to the keys for very long. It's headed to the auction block. Our Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us now from Rome with more on this fast-moving story. Juliette, why did Lamborghini donate this car?
Good question, Lauren. Actually, it's a bit of a tradition. Companies know that, that if they give an offering such as a very expensive gift to the Pope, they know that he's not going to keep it really, and they know that he's going to auction it and give the funds to charitable organizations. So you might remember that John Paul II received a Ferrari and actually had a little drive around St. Peter's Square a few years ago.
That's what I want. That's what I want. I want to see the Pope driving the Lamborghini. I have a feeling we're not going to see that. Tell me what he is going to do with the money. Where does that money go?
Well, exactly. This is a man who's not known for his love of flashy cars. In fact, on official trips, he tries to downplay the vehicles that he drives around in, and he's known to drive around the Vatican City in a very low-key Ford Focus. So he's planning to auction this Lamborghini, and the funds would go towards rebuilding homes, schools in Iraq's Nineveh plain, which has been destroyed by ISIS, and encouraging Christians to return to their roots and to be able to have their dignity restored. So some of the funds that he would raise through the auction would go to that, and then also towards charities in Africa that provide medical aid and that are helping the victims of human trafficking and prostitution.
So I've been there, as you know, to the Nineveh Plains, and this money is just so needed. I testified on Capitol Hill about how important it is to get the Christians back in these communities before the end of the year. Finally, Juliette, Lamborghinis are very expensive. How much, though, do you think the pontiff is going to raise by auctioning off this custom-made car?
So this is a Lamborghini Huracan, that's what it's known as, and the basic price tag is around $200,000. Now, this is a custom-made one. As you said, it's in the Vatican colors. It's white with some yellow trimming, and it's autographed on the hood by no one other than the Holy Father. So who knows how high bids will soar when it goes under the hammer.
Not only that, but he blessed the Lamborghini, and that is probably worth a lot more money. Thank you so much, Juliette Lindley,
Indeed.
EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent.
Thanks, Lauren.
Finally tonight, archaeologists may have found insights into biblical history through a toilet. This latrine found in Israel may date from the 8th century BC. It could be evidence of King Hezekiah's religious reforms. Archaeologists say the bathroom was in a shrine where altars were destroyed and the toilet was never used. So it could be proof the king centralized worship in Jerusalem and, ready for it, ready? And eliminated it elsewhere. Oh, that was so bad. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. We leave you tonight with more of today's papal audience at the Vatican. Good night, and God bless.